The Kingdom of England. Part 1. From Ancient Britain to the Norman Conquest. Long before England became a kingdom, before castles stood across its countryside, before kings wore crowns and armies marched beneath royal banners, the land we now call England was a world of forests, rivers, hills, and scattered settlements. Its history did not begin with a single king. It began with thousands of years of people arriving, settling, fighting, trading, building, and adapting to a changing land. This is the story of how those people and their kingdoms eventually created one of the most influential realms in European history, the Kingdom of England. Chapter 1. Before England. Thousands of years ago, Britain was inhabited by prehistoric communities who lived by hunting, fishing, farming, and gathering food from the land. Over generations, these communities transformed the landscape. They cleared forests, cultivated crops, raised animals, and built monuments whose remains can still be seen today. One of the most famous is Stonehenge. Its enormous stones stand as a reminder that the people of prehistoric Britain were capable of organizing large communities and undertaking extraordinary construction projects. But they left no written history of themselves. For written records, we must move forward to the final centuries before the birth of Christ. During this period, groups commonly described by Roman writers as Celts lived across Britain. The Celtic peoples were not a single unified nation. They consisted of different tribes, each with its own leaders, territories, customs, and rivalries. Hillforts became important centers of power. Warriors protected their territories, while farmers produced food for their communities. Traders connected Britain with continental Europe, bringing goods, ideas, and cultural influences across the sea. Britain was already connected to the wider world. Then, from across the English Channel, a new power began to look toward the island. Rome. Chapter 2. The Roman Invasion. In 43 AD, during the reign of Emperor Claudius, Roman forces invaded Britain. The invasion was not the beginning of Roman contact with Britain. Julius Caesar had crossed the Channel nearly a century earlier, but his expeditions had not resulted in permanent Roman conquest. Now Rome returned with a much larger military force. Roman soldiers landed in Britain and began advancing inland. Some tribes resisted, others chose to cooperate with Rome, hoping to gain protection, wealth, or political advantages. The conquest was difficult. Roman armies fought battles across Britain, and resistance continued for decades. One of the most famous figures of this resistance was Boudicca, Queen of the Iceni. After suffering severe treatment under Roman rule, Boudicca led a major uprising around 60 or 61 AD. Her forces attacked Roman settlements, including Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium. For a time, Roman authority in southeastern Britain appeared to be in serious danger. But the Roman governor, Suetonius Paulinus, eventually gathered his forces and defeated Boudicca's army. The rebellion was crushed. Rome continued its expansion. Over the following decades, Roman control spread across much of what is now England and Wales. Roads were constructed, forts appeared, towns developed, trade expanded. Roman administration transformed the landscape. One of the greatest examples of Roman engineering was the network of roads connecting military bases, towns, and settlements. Many modern roads in Britain follow routes that have ancient origins. The Romans also built cities. Londinium, established near the River Thames, became an important commercial centre. It would eventually become London, but Roman Britain was never completely peaceful. In the north, Roman armies faced fierce resistance from peoples beyond their frontier. To strengthen their northern border, Emperor Hadrian ordered the construction of Hadrian's Wall in the 2nd century. Stretching across northern England, the wall marked the edge of Roman power. For centuries, Roman Britain existed as part of a vast empire stretching across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. But no empire lasts forever. Chapter 3. The End of Roman Britain. By the 4th century, the Roman Empire faced increasing pressure. Enemies threatened its borders. Political struggles weakened its leadership. Economic difficulties placed enormous pressure on the imperial system. Roman soldiers stationed in Britain were increasingly needed elsewhere. Then, in the early 5th century, Roman military authority in Britain effectively came to an end. Around 410 AD, Roman forces withdrew. The people of Britain were left to defend themselves. The Roman world that had dominated Britain for centuries was disappearing. But what came next would shape the future of England. Chapter 4. The Coming of the Anglo-Saxons. After Roman rule collapsed, Britain entered a period of political uncertainty. Different local rulers competed for power. Roman towns declined in importance. Trade networks weakened. Across the North Sea, Germanic-speaking peoples began settling in eastern and southern Britain. They included the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. Over time, their settlements expanded. The name England itself would eventually come from the Angles, Angle land, the land of the Angles. The transition was not simple. There was migration, settlement, warfare, cooperation, and cultural change. Some Brittonic communities resisted the newcomers. Others lived alongside them. New political kingdoms gradually emerged. Among the most important were Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Sussex, and Wessex. Historians later referred to these kingdoms collectively as the Heptarchy. There was no single England yet. Instead, there was a collection of competing kingdoms. Kings fought for territory and influence. Alliances were created and broken. Power shifted from one kingdom to another. And religion was about to transform this world. Chapter 5. The Coming of Christianity. Christianity had existed in Britain during Roman times, but after the collapse of Roman authority, its influence varied greatly across different regions. In 597 AD, a missionary named Augustine arrived in Kent. He had been sent by Pope Gregory the Great to convert the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to Christianity. King Ethelbert of Kent eventually accepted Christianity. Augustine established a church at Canterbury. Canterbury would become one of the most important religious centers in England. Christianity gradually spread. Monasteries were established. Churches were built. Literacy became increasingly important because religious communities produced manuscripts and preserved written knowledge. The conversion of England was not immediate. Different kingdoms adopted Christianity at different times, and pagan traditions continued for generations. But eventually, Christianity became one of the foundations of English society. The Church also helped connect England to the wider Christian world of Europe. Yet political unity remained far away. Chapter 6. The Rise of Wessex. Among the many Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, one would eventually become particularly important: Wessex. Located in southern England, Wessex developed into a powerful kingdom. Its rulers competed with neighboring kingdoms, especially Mercia, but another threat was approaching from across the sea: the Vikings. Chapter 7. The Viking Age. At the end of the 8th century, Scandinavian raiders began attacking Britain. In 793, the monastery at Lindisfarne, off the northeastern coast, was attacked. The raid shocked Christian Europe. The Vikings had arrived. They came from Scandinavia, especially Denmark and Norway. At first, many Viking attacks were quick raids, but eventually, Viking armies began arriving in much larger numbers. They did not simply raid, they conquered. In the 9th century, a major Viking army entered England. Anglo-Saxon kingdoms fell one after another. Northumbria was conquered. East Anglia was defeated. Mercia was weakened. Only Wessex remained as a major center of resistance. Its king was Alfred, later known as Alfred the Great. Chapter 8. Alfred the Great. Alfred became king of Wessex in 871. He faced a powerful Viking army led by Guthrum. For a time, Alfred was forced into hiding in the marshes of Somerset, but he did not surrender. According to the traditional story, Alfred reorganized his forces and prepared to fight back. In 878, he defeated Guthrum at the Battle of Edington. The victory changed the future of England. Guthrum accepted baptism and reached an agreement with Alfred. The Vikings controlled large parts of England, an area that became known as the Danelaw. But Wessex survived. Alfred understood that military victory alone was not enough. He strengthened defenses. He built fortified settlements known as burhs. He reorganized his army. He encouraged learning and education. He supported the production of books and translations. Alfred believed that a strong kingdom required both military power and knowledge. His reign became a turning point. Wessex was no longer simply one Anglo-Saxon kingdom among many. It was becoming the center of a larger English state. Chapter 9. The Birth of England. After Alfred's death in 899, his successors continued expanding their influence. His son, Edward the Elder, captured territories from the Vikings. His daughter, Ethelfled, Lady of the Mercians, played an important role in defending and expanding English territory. Later, rulers continued the process. By the 10th century, much of England was increasingly united under one royal authority. One of the most important rulers was Aethelstan. He became king in 924 and is often regarded as the first king to rule a kingdom resembling a united England. Aethelstan defeated rivals and expanded his authority. In 937, he faced a powerful alliance of enemies at the Battle of Brunanburh. The battle was a major victory for Aethelstan. His kingdom emerged as one of the strongest political powers in Britain. England was becoming a recognizable kingdom, but its history remained unstable. The Vikings were not finished. Chapter 10: Kings, Vikings, and the Struggle for England. During the 10th and 11th centuries, England experienced repeated struggles between Anglo-Saxon kings and Scandinavian rulers. Kings rose and fell. Viking armies returned. Political alliances shifted. One of the most famous Viking rulers connected with England was Sweyn Forkbeard. In 1013, Sweyn conquered England and became king, but his reign was brief. He died in 1014. His son, Cnut, returned to England and eventually conquered the kingdom. Cnut became one of the most powerful rulers in Northern Europe. He ruled England, Denmark, Norway, and parts of Sweden. His empire connected England to the wider Scandinavian world. Yet Cnut did not simply rule England as a foreign conqueror. He worked with English institutions and the church. He married Emma of Normandy, the widow of King Aethelred II. For a time, England became the centre of a vast North Sea empire. But after Canut's death in 1035, his empire began to break apart. England eventually returned to Anglo-Saxon rule. The throne went to Edward the Confessor. Edward's reign would lead England toward another dramatic turning point. Chapter 11: Edward the Confessor. Edward became king in 1042. He was deeply religious and spent much of his reign balancing powerful nobles. One of the most influential figures in England was Harold Godwinson, a powerful Anglo-Saxon nobleman. Harold belonged to the Godwin family, one of the most powerful families in England. Edward had no surviving children. This created a dangerous question: who would become king after his death? Several men believed they had a claim. Among them was Harold Godwinson. Another was William, Duke of Normandy. William claimed that Edward had promised him the English throne. Harold's supporters disagreed. Then, in January 1066, Edward the Confessor died. Harold Godwinson was crowned king, but William of Normandy did not accept the decision. He believed the English crown belonged to him, and across the Channel he began preparing an invasion. Chapter 12: The Norman Conquest. 1066 became one of the most famous years in English history. Harold faced danger from more than one direction. First came a Norwegian invasion led by Harald Hardrada. Harold marched his army north and fought the Norwegians at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. The English victory was decisive, but Harold's army was exhausted. Then news arrived. William of Normandy had landed in southern England. Harold had to march south again. His soldiers travelled hundreds of miles in a short period. Finally, in October 1066, the two armies met near Hastings. The battle was long and difficult. The English army fought from a defensive position on high ground. Norman cavalry and infantry repeatedly attacked. According to the traditional account, the battle ended when Harold was killed. The English army collapsed. William had won. He became known as William the Conqueror. But victory on the battlefield did not immediately give him control of England. William had to conquer the kingdom. He marched through southern England, captured important towns, and built castles to secure his authority. On Christmas Day, 1066, William was crowned King of England at Westminster. A new era had begun. Chapter 13: A New England. The Norman Conquest transformed England. The new rulers spoke Norman French. They introduced new political and aristocratic structures. Norman nobles received lands in England. Castles appeared across the country. Stone fortifications became symbols of royal authority. One of the earliest and most famous was the Tower of London. The English aristocracy was largely replaced by Norman and other continental nobles. But the people of England did not disappear. English traditions survived. The English language survived. Local customs survived. Over generations, Norman French and Old English began to influence each other. The result would eventually contribute to the development of Middle English. William also ordered one of the most remarkable surveys in medieval history. The Domesday Book, completed in 1086, recorded enormous amounts of information about landholding, property, livestock, and resources across England. It demonstrated the strength of Norman royal administration. England had changed dramatically. The Anglo-Saxon age had ended. The Norman age had begun. But the story of the Kingdom of England was only entering its next great chapter. From ancient tribes to Roman Britain, from Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to Viking invasions, from Alfred the Great to Aethelstan, from Cnut to Edward the Confessor, and finally from the battlefield of Hastings to William the Conqueror's throne, England had been forged through centuries of conflict, migration, faith, ambition, and political struggle. Yet the kingdom that William inherited was not the final England. The The coming centuries would bring powerful dynasties, legendary kings, great wars, rebellions, parliaments, plagues, religious conflicts, and dramatic changes in the meaning of royal power. The Kingdom of England was still young. Its greatest chapters were yet to come. End of Part 1.